Knew something was wrong the second I walked into that conference room and saw my calendar had mysteriously cleared itself. No meetings, no reminders, just a single line at 9:00 a.m. Check-in with Nicole, HR joining. That's not a check-in. That's an execution disguised as a performance review. My name's Ryan Harris, I'm 49, and I'd just walked into what would become the most expensive mistake in Apex Technologies' history. Let me rewind before this whole thing went nuclear. 15 years. That's how long I gave them. I helped build Apex Technologies out of a cramped office space with flickering fluorescent lights and a coffee machine that died every other Tuesday. I still remember the night I pushed our first cybersecurity protocol live at 2:47 a.m., running on 3 hours of sleep and too much caffeine. We had no funding, no fancy UI, no backup plan, just Navy discipline and stubborn determination to build something that mattered. See, I'm not your typical tech founder. Did my time in the Navy from 1994 to 2001, earned my stripes in network security, then worked defense contracts for 8 years after that. When I joined Apex in 2009, we were building security infrastructure for government clients. Real stuff that kept actual bad guys out of critical systems. I was the one writing code that protected power grids and water treatment facilities, while everyone else was chasing the latest social media trend. They called me the Foundation back then. Ryan, who never missed a deployment deadline. Ryan, who could debug a breach at 3 a.m. and have systems back online before morning coffee. Ryan, who was too valuable to replace because I knew where every digital skeleton was buried. Funny how too valuable becomes too old-fashioned once the CEO's daughter decides she wants to modernize the company image. Morrison. That was the founder's name. Old-school guy who understood that security wasn't glamorous, but it was essential. His daughter Brittany, though, she had different ideas about what the company should become. Fast forward to last quarter. I'm still running point on our core infrastructure, but suddenly I'm not getting invited to leadership meetings anymore. One week, it's we're streamlining communications. The next week, it's trying to reduce meeting fatigue. My Slack messages get thumbs-up reactions and radio silence. I didn't need a security clearance to read the writing on the wall. Brittany Morrison had officially taken control. 34 years old, Harvard MBA, never written a line of code in her life. But she had opinions about user experience journeys and loved saying things like, "Data is the new oil" in every company presentation. I didn't dislike her at first. She was energetic, confident, and wore business suits that probably cost more than my truck payment. But slowly, her vision started replacing our foundation. Longtime engineers were getting swapped out for LinkedIn all-stars with impressive resumes and zero understanding of what we actually built. The culture shifted from get it done to get the optics right. I wasn't part of the new optics. I played along. Didn't push back when Brittany brought in her Harvard classmate as VP of Strategic Innovation. Didn't roll my eyes when we rebranded from secure systems to digital transformation solutions. I just kept doing what I'd always done, solving the impossible with discipline and logic. My military training taught me patience, and sometimes the best strategy is watching your opponent make mistakes. Then came the company rebrand. New logo, new motto, powering tomorrow's security. And suddenly, a very public push to highlight fresh voices in our engineering blog. Guess who wasn't considered fresh anymore? I became the ghost in the machine, still fixing things when production broke at midnight, but otherwise invisible. My son Logan, 19 and in his sophomore year at Northwestern, started asking questions during our weekly calls. "Dad, you sound tired. Everything okay at work?" I'd tell him things were fine. But the truth was, I could see the writing on the wall. The company I'd helped build from nothing was being reshaped into something I barely recognized. And my equity stake, The money that was supposed to secure Logan's education and my retirement was tied up in a business that increasingly didn't want me around. Until that HR calendar invite showed up. The night before that meeting, I found myself digging through an old folder on my personal drive I hadn't touched in years. Founding Documents, 2009. Buried deep in my cloud storage beneath layers of old contract files and incorporation papers. Something about the silence around me, the way I'd been erased without even being confronted, triggered my old military instincts. When you've been trained to prepare for threats you can't see coming, you develop habits that stick. I remembered a clause, a weird protective one from back when our lawyers were still figuring things out and we all thought equity was some kind of magic. Mr. Morrison had insisted on it, said something about protecting the people who actually built the foundation while the business folks worried about the pretty stuff on top. I didn't even open the document that night, just stared at the file name. Then I bookmarked it. My gut told me to keep that close, and after 2 decades of trusting my instincts in high-stakes situations, I'd learned not to ignore them. The morning of the meeting, I drove to work in my 2018 Ford F-150. Reliable, practical, the kind of truck that gets the job done without making a statement. I'd bought it used because I was busy putting money into Logan's college fund instead of impressing people in the company parking lot. Priorities. Walking through the lobby, I nodded to security. Guys who knew me, respected what I'd built. They had no idea this might be the last time they'd see me as an employee instead of a visitor. The conference room was on the 3rd floor. Glass walls, corporate art, the kind of sterile environment where careers go to die. Brittany walked into that glass fishbowl conference room like she was auditioning for a corporate reality show. She had that confident glow people get when they're about to do something incredibly stupid with absolute certainty. Her heels clicked like a countdown timer as she crossed the room, not even looking at me until she sat down. Behind her, Nicole from HR fumbled with a stapled packet, looking like she was trying to locate the nearest exit in case things went sideways. I didn't move, just sat straight, hands folded, like I'd been through this kind of briefing before, because I had, just never with such obvious theater. Brittany cleared her throat. "Ryan, thanks for making the time. I wanted to say, you scheduled this over my infrastructure review," but I just nodded. "We've been evaluating team dynamics and overall strategic alignment," she began, using that rehearsed tone you get when someone practices in front of a mirror, but forgets they're talking to an actual person. "There have been consistent concerns about your adaptability to our new methodologies and resistance to collaborative evolution." Translation: You didn't kiss enough ass in Slack channels, and you questioned my friend's brilliant idea to outsource our core security monitoring to a third-party vendor last month. Nicole piped up with, "We want to foster an environment where all voices feel heard." I glanced at her. Apparently not mine. Brittany slid a manila envelope across the table like she was serving divorce papers. "This is your exit package. Termination is effective immediately." I looked down at the envelope. No negotiation, no warning, just a clean break. That told me this wasn't reactive. This was planned, premeditated. The room suddenly reeked of expensive perfume and cowardice. "I know this is a lot to process," Brittany said, grinning wider. "We really appreciate your contributions over the years." I could have laughed, but it would have been wasted energy. Instead, I looked her square in the eye, picked up the envelope, tucked it into my jacket, and said, "I'll clear out my desk. No protests, no emotional speeches about loyalty or legacy. Just calm, controlled, military bearing." Brittany blinked like she hadn't gotten the dramatic scene she was hoping for. Nicole started to say something about transition support, but I was already standing. I walked through the open office, past the engineers pretending not to notice, past the product team staring at their monitors like maybe if they didn't look, it wasn't happening. One guy, Jordan from infrastructure, caught my eye and mouthed, "What the hell?" I just gave him a single nod. At my desk, I packed methodically. Not frantically, not for show, just efficiently. 2 technical achievement awards, one for implementing our zero-breach security framework, another for the government contract that saved the company during the 2016 recession. A photo of Logan at his high school at graduation, proud smile in his cap and gown. A worn stress ball shaped like a server rack that he'd given me for Father's Day 3 years ago, when he was still trying to understand what his old man did for a living. I left the company mug and the branded notebook. Didn't feel like carrying around souvenirs from a place that had just erased me. Then I did something that probably looked like absent-minded forgetfulness. I placed my badge on the desk, and beside it I laid a slim black folder. No label, no explanation, just matte black with slightly worn edges from years in storage. I walked out of Apex Technologies for what everyone assumed was the last time. No tears, no drama, no resistance, just a man who knew where all the digital bodies were buried and had kept every receipt. The news hit Slack like a cyber attack. Ryan's outspread through every channel faster than a network worm. The general chat went quiet, but the direct messages lit up like Christmas. Everyone suddenly very interested in what just happened. Some people reacted fast. The ones who owed Brittany favors or wanted to stay on her good side. Lots of wishing. Ryan the best in his future endeavors posts with emoji so forced they practically screamed, "Please don't fire me next." A few engineers added heart emojis. Jordan posted a single broken server icon. But the real conversation was happening in private channels, in encrypted messages, in hushed conversations by the coffee machine. The whispers weren't about me leaving. They were about how fast and quiet it had been. No announcement, no farewell email thanking one of the company founders. Just gone. People remembered that I'd been there since the beginning, that I'd pulled all-nighters to meet government contract deadlines, that I'd personally written the security protocols that kept Fortune 500 clients from getting hacked, that my code was literally the foundation everything else was built on. And now, I was just erased. Brittany wasn't about to let silence tell the story. Mid-afternoon, she called an emergency all-hands meeting. Perfect camera angle, professional background, the whole performance. "Hi, everyone," she said with that practiced smile. "I wanted to share some exciting organizational updates. As part of our continued leadership evolution, we've made the strategic decision to transition Ryan Harris, our former CTO, to pursue new opportunities." Former CTO. Like I hadn't been there before the company had actual customers. To move forward with our innovation roadmap, we need leadership that's agile and collaborative. Legacy approaches can slow down velocity. There it was. Legacy approaches. She didn't say dead weight directly, but the message was clear. The old Navy guy was holding back progress. I watched the recording later from my kitchen table. By the time I'd driven home in my Ford, the one I never upgraded because I was busy putting Logan through Northwestern at $60,000 a year, the video was already posted on the company portal. I didn't get angry, didn't punch walls, didn't even curse. I opened my laptop, propped it against a coffee mug, and tethered it to my phone. Took 8 seconds to boot up, another 6 to find the file. Founding Documents, 2009, Shareholder Agreement, PDF. Article 7. There it was. The protective clause from our original shareholder agreement, drafted back when Mr. Morrison was still running things, and we were all young and optimistic enough to think loyalty mattered more than politics. A clause that had been revised and updated in every funding round since, but never deleted because no one thought it would ever matter. It stated in plain language that the founding technical officer, defined explicitly by name and original code contribution, could not be involuntarily terminated without unanimous consent from all registered investors. Not just the board, not just the CEO. All investors. And if that consent wasn't obtained, immediate reversion of core IP authorizations and hostile transfer triggers would activate. I read it 3 times, making sure I understood every word. Then I smiled for the first time all day. Basically, if you screw me without permission, I get to legally torch the whole operation. I opened my email and typed one line to my attorney, a sharp woman named Sarah Williams, who once told a federal judge that ignorance of binding clauses isn't a legal defense. She'd helped me with my divorce papers 3 years ago and had handled some contract reviews when I was doing freelance work. Subject: Activate Article 7. Urgent. I attached the PDF, my original IP assignment docs, and a screenshot of Brittany's announcement where she was smiling like she'd just won the corporate lottery. Hit send. Closed the laptop, leaned back, and stared out at the gray December sky. This wasn't over. It was just getting started. Brittany moved fast. Less than 72 hours after my departure, she was on a stage in San Francisco, announcing that Apex Technologies was entering final negotiations for acquisition by Vault Core Industries, a massive data security conglomerate known for swallowing smaller companies and bleeding their IP dry. 85 million. That was the number getting whispered in investor circles and leaked to tech blogs. For someone like me, with my equity stake, that meant Logan's college tuition was finally secure. It meant early retirement, maybe a cabin up north where I could fish and not think about corporate politics. Except there was one small problem Brittany didn't announce. Due diligence. See, tech press loves covering acquisitions like fairy tale weddings, all smiles and excited about the future quotes. But behind every big buyout is a team of lawyers and risk officers digging through every document the company ever signed: cap tables, vesting schedules, IP agreements, privacy disclosures, even boardroom minutes from 2009, especially those. Which is why 1 week after Brittany's announcement, a woman named Melissa Torres from VaultCore's legal team started making polite but increasingly pointed requests. Full equity documentation, founder exit verification, IP origination records. And while all that was happening, I vanished. No LinkedIn post about new opportunities. No bitter Medium article titled, "Why I Left Apex." No scorned founder rants. Just silence. The kind that makes people nervous, especially when that silence used to hold root access to every system keeping the lights on. I knew Brittany was monitoring everything now, scanning for backlash like a radar operator on high alert. She had people checking social media, watching for any sign that I might go public with whatever dirt I had. The fact that I wasn't making noise, that was the real backlash, because silence from someone who knows every password and every licensing agreement is terrifying. Logan called me that Wednesday evening. "Dad, I saw something online about your company getting bought." That's good news, right? I was sitting in my kitchen with a beer and leftover pizza, looking at Sarah's latest email about legal strategy. "It's complicated, son." "Complicated how?" I thought about how much to tell him. He was 19, smart enough to understand business basics, but this was chess played with lawyers and board resolutions. "Let's just say your old man might have a few cards to play yet." He laughed. "You always were good at keeping secrets. Mom used to say you could probably run the CIA if you wanted to. After we hung up, I stared at the phone for a while. 3 years since the divorce, and I was still learning how to be a single dad to a kid who was becoming a man. The equity stake wasn't just about money. It was about making sure Logan had choices I never did. College without debt. Time to figure out what he wanted to do instead of what he had to do. That's when Brittany's overconfidence really started showing. Meanwhile, she was smiling through pitch calls with Vault Core, talking about our scalable infrastructure, the one I designed. Bragging about our flexible API ecosystem. The one I patched during a Christmas Day outage in 2018 while she was posting vacation photos from Aspen. She spun my 15 years of work like it was her personal achievement, telling acquisition executives about our robust cybersecurity framework, without mentioning that I was the one who wrote every line of the core protection protocols. In the background, Melissa and her team kept digging. It started small. A request to review the 2009 shareholder agreement in full. Brittany brushed it off. We've updated our cap table multiple times since then. Legacy documents aren't materially relevant to current operations. They asked again. This time copying Brandon Miller, the lead investor. Then came a third request with a list of specific questions. Can you confirm there was a formal board vote for CTO removal? Was investor consent documented and unanimous? Please attach verification. I knew Brittany was feeling pressure because she suddenly posted a team photo on LinkedIn. Big smiles, everyone tagged. Caption: Apex's future is brighter than ever. Pure distraction. But her hands were already shaking behind the scenes. Brandon Miller wasn't just some suit with an MBA. He'd been on our original formation calls back when Apex was 6 people and a dream. He was the one who argued for protective clauses in case some hotshot tried to innovate out the person who actually built the foundation. He understood that technical founders weren't interchangeable parts you could swap out when the optics changed. He knew exactly why Article 7 existed. If Brittany hadn't gotten unanimous consent to terminate me, that clause had just been triggered. But she didn't know that yet. She still thought she'd won. Sarah called me Friday morning. Ryan, I've been through the documents. You need to understand what you're sitting on here. I'm listening. Article 7 isn't just about wrongful termination. It's about IP ownership reversion. If they fired you without proper consent, you don't just get a settlement. You get control of the foundational intellectual property. Everything built on your original code architecture. I set my coffee down. Meaning? Meaning you could potentially own the core technology that makes Apex valuable to Vault Core. Without that IP, there's no $85 million deal. There's no deal at all. I sat in my kitchen, looking out at the December morning, understanding for the first time exactly what kind of weapon Article 7 really was. Sarah, I think it's time we made some calls. The cracks started small, a hairline fracture in what looked like a perfect acquisition deal. But when you start stacking $85 million worth of pressure on top of a flawed foundation, hairline cracks don't just widen, they shatter everything. It began with one email buried in a thread about cap table reconciliation. Subject: follow-up. Historical documentation request from Brandon Miller to Brittany, CCing legal, finance, and Vault Core's due diligence team. Need original signatory records from 2009. Prefer PDF scans, not transcriptions. Simple request. Lethal implications. Brittany read it twice, eyes narrowing. Her first instinct was classic executive deflection. She replied, Hi, Brandon. We've updated all equity structures as of Series C. Historical documents aren't materially relevant to the acquisition. but happy to confirm with our internal counsel. A non-answer dressed up like cooperation. But Brandon wasn't buying corporate speak. He never asked for cap table updates. He asked for signatory history, original documents, founding fingerprints. While Brittany performed damage control, someone much lower on the food chain noticed something odd. Lauren Foster, junior analyst at VaultCore, smart, underpaid, terrified of missing critical details, was combing through system access logs when she stumbled across a dormant repository titled Core Foundation RH 2009, Backup V2. It hadn't been touched in years, just archived under layers of platform updates. But there it was, metadata time-stamped to hell and back. All the foundational IP, encryption protocols, threat detection algorithms, network security architecture, still linked to my author ID, Ryan H. And next to that, a permissions field. Foundational IP rights reserved. Lauren didn't know what that meant, but she knew enough to flag it. Her manager flagged it to legal. Legal paused a scheduled call with VaultCore halfway through a PowerPoint about scalability metrics. They muted the CEO mid-sentence and asked, "Who authorized the termination of the founding technical officer?" Dead silence. Not the thinking kind. The "oh shit, we just drove off a cliff" kind. Brittany tried to play it cool. We had an internal process, standard exit procedures. The associate counsel, a guy in his 30s who'd been quiet the entire meeting, suddenly unmuted. Was unanimous investor consent obtained? Her expression flickered. Excuse me? For his removal, or his... Article 7 of the original shareholder agreement requires full investor consent for termination of the founding technical officer. Unanimous consent. Another silence. Heavier this time, because now everyone knew they knew. That clause was superseded in Series C, I believe, Brittany said. I'll need to double-check. The lawyer didn't blink. Please do. And send the supersession documentation along with the original signatory trail. We'll need both today. She muted her mic and threw a pen hard enough to dent the wall. Due diligence froze like a server crash during peak traffic. 1 minute, VaultCore's team was firing off integration timelines and asking for Q4 projections. The next minute, everything went cold. Emails went unanswered. Calendar invites disappeared. Pending clarification became the phrase of the week. Corporate speak for something's rotten, and nobody wants to touch it. Brandon called for an emergency board meeting. No pleasantries, no schedule coordination. Required, attendance, non-compliance will be noted. In investor speak, that's basically a death threat. The boardroom was tomb quiet for a Monday morning. No paper shuffling, no casual pre-meeting chat. Even the air conditioning seemed to be holding its breath. Brittany sat at the head of the table, flanked by Alex, the general counsel, who looked like he hadn't slept since the compliance emails started flying. Brandon Miller sat across from her with a thick binder. The original shareholder agreement, printed on slightly yellowed paper that still smelled like 2009. His fingers flipped through it methodically until they stopped. Page 73. Article 7. He leaned back, adjusted his glasses, and read aloud in that calm, lethal tone of someone who's never lost a legal argument. In the event of involuntary removal of the designated founding technical officer, unanimous consent of all Series A through C investors shall be required prior to execution of termination. Failure to obtain said consent shall result in immediate reversion of foundational intellectual property rights to said officer. The silence bent under the weight of what he'd just said. He signed the exit paperwork, Brittany said. That implies consent. Brandon's eyes narrowed. Not confusion, Astonishment, like watching someone stick a fork in an electrical outlet on purpose. He signed a termination package, Brittany. That's not consent. That's compliance under false pretenses. You never brought this to the board. You acted unilaterally and just triggered hostile IP reversion. The sentence hit like a system failure during a security breach. Alex reached for his water bottle with visibly shaking hands. You're saying, Brittany began. I'm saying the man you fired holds legal control of the core technology your entire platform runs on, and because of your negligence, that control has reverted to him. Then fix it, she hissed. Call him. Offer more equity. Write a settlement. Brandon straightened. He's already retained counsel and spoken to press. He doesn't want a settlement. He paused, scanning the room. He wants you gone. A murmur rippled down the table. Brandon pulled out a second document, a printed email chain between my attorney and VaultCore's legal team. He's offered to license the IP back to Apex, but only after leadership changes are formalized, including removal of the current CEO for material breach. Brittany's mouth opened in disbelief. This is my father's company. Brandon's face stayed stone cold. It was, until you torched the clause that gave you permission to run it. The board chair, a former defense contractor with dead eyes and a pension tied to this acquisition, finally spoke. How quickly can we replace her? They walked her out that afternoon. No manila envelope, no smug grin, just 2 HR reps and a box of belongings she didn't pack herself. The filing hit the newswire at 7:04 a.m. Eastern. Brief, clinical, bloodless, Apex Technologies acquisition delayed due to internal IP review. By 8:20, shares in VaultCore had dropped 4 points. By noon, 3 tech blogs were running stories about founders' revenge clauses and corporate governance failures. Inside Apex, panic moved like wildfire. Emergency statements about leadership transitions and strategic realignment. By 2 p.m., Brittany Morrison was gone. Meanwhile, I was in my kitchen with black coffee and the morning paper, watching December rain streak down the window like digital static. My phone buzzed. New email. Subject: Request to reopen licensing negotiations. Apex Technologies. I opened it slowly, though I already knew what it would say. Polite language, apologetic tone, phrases like mutually beneficial solutions and expedited framework proposals. It ended with, please advise how you'd prefer to proceed. 20 minutes later, another email landed. This one from VaultCore. Their revised offer, 2x my original equity stake, full licensing authority, advisory role optional. I didn't rush to sign after 15 years of building this backbone while they smiled for cameras. It felt good to be the ghost they couldn't bury. Logan called that evening. Dad, I saw the news about your company. You okay? I looked out at the gray Ohio sky, thinking about honor codes and keeping your word, and what happens when you mistake silence for weakness. Yeah, son. Better than okay. Your tuition's covered, and then some. What happened? Your old man remembered to read the fine print. And sometimes, son, the best revenge is just letting people hang themselves with their own rope. For the first time in months, I actually meant it when I said everything was going to be fine.